Hello, my name is Angie and I'm going to present our study we did with the Forest School. So to begin, our team is curious about how to design school buildings. And we are interested in innovative approaches to learning. We want to find out how new educational approaches use spaces and how their innovation can influence standard school designs. We want to ground these ideas in an evidence basis, and we are using mapping as a way to discover how teachers and children use educational spaces. We became interested in outdoor learning as an innovative approach that we wanted to explore. So outdoor learning is learning through nature. It's not about sending kids out to play for recess and then bringing them back for the real learning inside the classroom. This sort of concept actually defies the idea that a school is actually a building. And I learned about outdoor learning through the Forest School when my daughter started to attend there. And as you can see, there are photos of my daughter in this presentation. And I was intrigued about this learning process because we saw the benefits that it was having with her. So the Forest School is actually a preschool in kindergarten, and it's in a suburban context in Calgary. So the Forest School is really a reaction to a cultural perception that children are spending way too much time indoors and in front of digital screens. So the Forest School began in Denmark, maybe around 50 years ago, and then it spread to Britain and other international locations like Canada. And we are in Calgary, Alberta in Canada. And in Calgary, the coldest month of the year is January, and where the average low is minus 14 degrees Celsius. So about a quarter of the year, or 86 days, there's at least 1 centimeter of snow on the ground in Calgary. So we were looking at previous studies, in particular that were using behavioral mapping, and they were studying school playgrounds. But we noticed that many of these studies were in warm climates, and we began to wonder, what about winter? How do these findings play out in a colder climate? So these studies are based on Gibson's affordance theory, which states that objects afford certain uses. So a use of an object is reliant on the object and the human itself. So a tree with low branches, we would say a tree that affords climbing. So for our study, we looked at 4 different schools in 2 locations. So there was Heritage Park, which is in a suburban part of the city, and it's a cultural amenity. So it's basically a big sort of museum, outdoor museum park that's very popular in the summer, but it's closed in the winter months, so the school can use it at that time. And it offers a variety of landscapes. So there are forested areas, more open areas, some buildings, and there's a water feature, which is the reservoir. So at the lake site, it is just south of the city border, and it's a public park, and it uses a classroom in the community hall as it uses a room in the community hall as a classroom. So for our methodology, we use 3 different methods, and the first is behavioral mapping. And so that's a photo of me doing my mapping study, and as you can see, I have a clipboard and I'm recording on site the behaviors of the children on this chart. And this is a copy of the chart. So here, this section is where I record the various behaviors, or the cognitive play behaviors. And this is where you record the environment, or the various environmental features that they're doing, that they're exhibiting this behavior with. And then I also record where they're doing this on a map. So we also included observational aspects in that I spent the full day with the school for the 2 weeks that we were doing the study, so we could see the flow of the day, how the children and students work together. And we also did some photo documentation. So I recorded what the environments and different features that the children were using and playing with. So our study was conducted in January, where the average temperature is -9 degrees Celsius and snow covered the ground. We studied over 8 days and we did 2 one-hour sessions a day. And for each of these hours, we made observations at 5-minute intervals. So we were able to observe in total 56 different children, resulting in 1,622 spatial temporal observations, which we were able to analyze later. So the four-school pedagogy revolves around the idea of play, and that children learn through play with nature. So there's actually no recess in the day. There's no time where the teachers say, okay, now go play, and then we're going to come back and learn. Instead, playing and learn happen in tandem with various activities and instruction, but it happens sort of at the same time. So because of this, we were able to use Rubin's play observation scale, which identifies 5 different cognitive play behaviors, and I'm going to get into those in more detail now. So for the first one is functional, which is a physical type of play. So it can involve digging with snow, eating snow, sliding, that sort of thing. Constructive play involves building, stacking, making things. Exploratory play is basically discovering and looking for something new, or maybe observing changes in nature. Dramatic play could be using this bucket as a pot to cook your dinner and to play kitchen, or you could be using this bucket to hide your eggs if you were as a nest if you were playing dinosaurs. And games with rules, which involve like baseball and soccer. And to be honest, we didn't observe a lot of games with rules, and that's mostly because you don't usually observe these with preschool children. So for my results, I can tell you a little bit about snow, a little bit about travel, some about snowsuits, and I will offer some design implications. So first of all, we did do some chi-squared test of independence to see if there was association between the play behaviors and in the environment, and we found that yes, there's definitely an association. So in this chart, you can see these shapes that are red are the cognitive play behaviors. So each rectangle represents a percentage of the whole time spent in our observations with each of these behaviors in each of those environments. So the area of the rectangle is proportional to the whole. And from this you can see that snow afforded the most cognitive play behaviors. From this map, the orange dots are cognitive play behaviors, the black dots are other behaviors, and in the red box there's a cluster of play behaviors, and that is around the snow sculpture. So this photo is of the snow sculpture, and it has melted a little bit, but basically the snow sculpture afforded a lot of cognitive play, and that's because they built it, they then climbed and played with it, and they also played house with it. So snow is really great. It affords lots of different activities. It's malleable and it's constructible, but it can also be tricky in that it's cold, it gets wet when it melts, and it's unpredictable. So the environmental feature that afforded the second most play behaviors was loose parts. So loose parts, for example, are buckets. They could be the pots and pans in the mud kitchen, and hammocks that are hanging from the fence. And in this map, you can see a cluster of cognitive play behaviors around the mud kitchen, around the picnic table, and around the hammocks hanging on the fence. Okay, so for travel, these two charts show the distances traveled by the children at the different locations. So on the left is Heritage Park, and on the right is at the lake site. So at Heritage Park, you can see that the majority of the time was spent under 50 meters from their classroom door, but that they did travel up to 200 meters from their classroom multiple times during the week. At the lake site, you can see that most of the time was spent under 100 meters from their classroom door, but on day 4, they traveled 600 meters from their classroom. And it's important to note this was twice in the day, and so it totaled 1.2 kilometers traveled. And this is in fairly deep snow by 4- and 5-year-old kids. So this map shows where the children walked across the site from the classroom all the way to the lakeside, and you can see they walked through treed areas, open areas, into the frozen lake. And this is Heritage Park, where they walked through the forest down to a path which is next to the reservoir. So the important thing here is that this travel is not just for exercise, it's a part of the learning, and the diversity of the landscape is a part of that exploration and a part of that learning process in the outdoor education program. So we also recorded non-play behaviors. So this included instructional, curriculum activity, transitional, and other. So for the transitional time was by far the most. And basically this transitional time equates to the amount of time it takes for a young preschooler to put on a snowsuit. So at the forest school, learning to get dressed and put your gear on is good. But because of the design of the school, there is a time spent waiting for others. And this does happen, multiple times a day, which means that there is quite a bit of time spent in transition. So for design implications, our study didn't focus on new design solutions, but we began to wonder, how can this design be used in regular school designs? How can this data be used in regular school design? We wondered, what if a school was designed entirely around snow? And playgrounds were designed to gather or highlight snow, much like this photo where the students used many buckets to make themselves ice blocks and used those to create their own play environment. Or when a school is designed around, the snow removal is designed and used to the benefit of the school. So this is a typical scene in a Canadian parking lot where all the snow is gathered into one place, and potentially that could be designed. Also, maybe shovels and tools could be stored and available close by. So for travel on the site, outposts and stations make a lot of sense. That there should be a place to warm your hands, go to the washroom, and various storage that doesn't require you going back always to the main classroom. Also, with travel, landscape design and the variety actually supports learning. It's not just an aesthetic thing to have trees on your site, but it supports the learning process. So with snowsuits, we observed that we think that this is really a universal issue, and that this transition time may be hindering other schools from benefiting from outdoor learning. Some design ways of solving this would be to have washrooms that are easily accessible in your snowsuit, and really well-designed indoor changing spaces. So in summary, we talked about mapping as an evidence basis for school design and outdoor learning in winter. Also, that snow and loose parts afford the most cognitive play behaviors, that travel is important, and we talked about the reduction of transition time.